Well, for more on this, Erin Ogunkeye joins me now in the studio for Global Grid. Hi, Erin. Nice to see you.
Likewise.
So tell us more about this new diplomatic incident.
So, Yinka, earlier there was one with France. This time, like you said, it's Denmark. So the expected incoming ambassador actually hasn't been confirmed yet. So that's why it was the chargé d'affaires who was called upon by Danish authorities. Again, there's this claim, according to Danish media, that at least 3 men with connections to Donald Trump have essentially been trying to influence civil society by infiltrating Greenland. Now, one of the men made a list, reportedly, of Trump supporters in the territory and reportedly had plans to recruit them, to establish a secessionist movement on the island, while the 2 other individuals were just in the early stages of making contacts with politicians, businesses, and other leaders. But Danish authorities actually, for now, Yinka, say that they've been unable to establish whether or not these individuals were given an official order from the White House or from higher-ups, but it was enough to provoke a reaction from Denmark. They said they wanted to have a preventative conversation about what was happening. So the official met with Danish authorities for what was described as a productive meeting, the 2 reiterating their strong bilateral ties. The U.S., for its part, said in a statement yesterday that Washington does not control or direct the actions of any private citizens. Later, in rather Trumpian language, the White House also said, I quote, "We think the Danes need to calm down." And I'll finish, Inka, by saying this is actually the second time that this has happened. In May, the Danish foreign minister summoned, the USdiplomat as well in response to a separate report at the time saying that U.S. spy agencies had indeed been directed to concentrate their attention on Greenland, including by learning about independence movements and trying to gauge support for American mineral extraction there.
Well, Trump has made no secret of his desire to annex Greenland. Tell us what the context is in all of this.
So on numerous occasions, Yinka, which actually started before Donald Trump officially took office, when he was president-elect, this is when it was started, he was asked kind of what his foreign policy was going to be. And one of the things he said was that he refused to rule out military action in order to gain control of both the Panama Canal and Greenland when asked about his agenda. Now, he's repeated the same thing multiple times since January. Notably, I think one of the most audacious incidents is when he was at a press conference alongside the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, and he repeated these same claims and even insisted that NATO would be instrumental in helping the United States annex Greenland. Rutte rather awkwardly responded by saying that he simply did not want to drag NATO into that debate. He kept it there at that point in time. So it's difficult to say if this is kind of trolling from the administration or a serious policy. That said, Yinka, it's worth reminding viewers of the political context, its strategic importance. In Greenland, it's, of course, a part of the kingdom of Denmark, but has quite a bit of autonomy. Very small population, just 57,000 people. American forces are stationed at the island on the military base of Patuffik. It's one of the most strategically important military bases in the world, really, especially for defense reasons. If Russia were to fire missiles at the United States, they would theoretically pass through the North Pole and the Arctic along the coast of Greenland. So China and Russia have also been strengthening their military capabilities in the region. It follows then that the U.S. has kind of been trying to follow to compete with that. And finally, they have strategic reserves, including the infamous rare earth minerals that have been so high on the agenda in recent months, in addition to uranium and iron, all of which are expected to become more easily accessible as global warming continues.
And this is, of course, all part of a much more expansive effort by the Trump administration to influence domestic politics in several European countries.
Yeah, Yinka, this whole incident really reminded me of J.D. Vance's now very infamous comments at the Munich Security Conference back in February of this year, which he actually started by saying to the European leaders present that there is a new sheriff in town, obviously referring to Donald Trump. But then he essentially went on to lecture European leaders about the state of democracy across the continent, painting their nations as a place where freedom of speech is under threat, where immigrants are essentially replacing European, read white populations, and a place that's comparable to the Soviet Union and its crackdowns on right-wing, far right-wing parties. European leaders were initially quite shocked about those remarks, but it seems that has waned in recent months, especially as they seek cooperation with the administration on a number of serious issues, notably the war in Ukraine, and of course trying to get him to backtrack on some of his harshest tariff threats over the past several months. But still, the attempts by this administration to influence domestic politics have continued. The most recent being, of course, when France summoned its U.S. ambassador after he wrote a letter to Emmanuel Macron saying domestically he wasn't doing enough in France to combat anti-Semitism. What's interesting about that is that France did describe it as meddling in its domestic affairs, which is illegal under international law. But the ambassador never showed up. France sent its number two, which theoretically, in any other case, would be a real diplomatic crisis. And it's just kind of been swept under the rug here. We haven't heard much of that since it was revealed that the ambassador didn't show. So these are examples of political influence. I think there have been signs of attempts to wage economic influence as well. Again, Yinka, earlier this week, Donald Trump said that he would threaten additional tariffs on countries that discriminate against U.S. tech companies. Discriminate, of course, meaning pass regulations, legislations that are simply aimed at getting these U.S. tech companies to respect the laws of the nations that they're operating in. For Donald Trump, that's discrimination, and he says if he sees it, tariffs. So it'll be really a test, I think, of European sovereignty to see whether or not these countries allow the Trump administration to essentially dictate social and economic policy domestically in a bunch of countries, or, if these countries say, put limits and boundaries at some point, saying we are sovereign nations and have the right to determine our own domestic policies.
Great stuff, Erin. Thank you so much for that piece of analysis there.